Snow dripped from her lashes as she hid under the tracks, clutching Rose. So why was the man with her mother's keys walking away? The rail yard on the east side of Spokane always sounded alive, even in winter. Tonight it was damp and wrong, just the hiss of brake lines, a few yard lights smearing across wet snow, and the river smell pushing in from the dark. I was working overtime because a rookie called out sick and because I was too close to retirement to say no. 52 counting weeks, trying not to think about the last kid I couldn't save. Dispatch had said, possible trespasser, maybe juvenile, BNSF service track near the old depot. Trespassers out here were usually bored teens or someone chasing copper, not 6-year-olds. My boots sank into the slush that had frozen, thawed, and frozen again. Beyond the fence, a lone switch engine idled, orange flashing off its sides. A horn blew from upriver, low, rolling, and the sound spilled over the yard like cold water. That was when I heard it. Not a cry, not words, more like a breath that got stuck. SPD, I called, voice steady. Hey, whoever's out here, I need you to answer. No answer, just the ticking of a cooling rail. I swept my flashlight under the platform that hadn't seen passengers in 20 years. Old concrete, ice buildup, trash, some cardboard. Then the beam caught a color that didn't belong to the yard. Faded pink, stitched petals. A rag doll. She was curled behind a support pillar, small body jammed in like she'd been trained to make herself invisible. Wet snow clung to her hair. Her winter coat was 2 sizes too big and zipped crooked. She held the doll like it was the only thing keeping her tethered. I crouched, dropped my light lower. Hey there. Her eyes met mine fast, wide winter blue, rimmed red. She didn't scream. She didn't even flinch. But when another horn blew far off, her whole body shuddered. Her fingers crushed the doll to her chest. Okay, I said softer. Okay, I'm Officer Elliot Ward with the Spokane Police Department. You're not in trouble. She watched my hands. Smart kid. Scared kid. I'm going to come a little closer, all right? No nod. No shake. But she didn't back away, and that was enough. I holstered the flashlight and slid it across the concrete toward her so she could see my hands were empty. The doll was rough-sewn, pale cloth body, red yarn hair, a crooked embroidered name across the dress. Rose. Pretty doll, I said. She got a name? Nothing. Her lips parted, then closed. Selective, I thought. Or shock. Or someone scared the sound right out of her. Can you tell me your name? Another horn. Closer now. Someone moving a freight through town. The second it sounded, she ducked her head, eyes squeezing shut, shoulders jumping. Not random, I noted. Triggered. Horn equals tremor. I keyed my radio low. Dispatch 2-1-4. I've got a female juvenile approximately 6 years old. Found under the old depot platform. Conscious, appears cold, and possibly traumatized. Requesting EMS to Riverbend Children's. No apparent injuries. Copy 2-1-4. EMS en route. She stared at the radio like it might bark at her. Hey, I said quickly, putting it away. That was just me talking to my friends. They're going to help, okay? Her gaze dropped to the badge on my coat. A slow recognition or just cataloging threat. Kids who've had to survive get real good at reading uniforms. You out here alone? I asked. Is your mom close? Dad? Nothing again. Her breathing had the fast, shallow pace of someone who'd been holding it too long. I shrugged off my patrol jacket and slid it toward her. It's wet and you're freezing. Let me get this on you. She hesitated, then, carefully, like she was negotiating with an unseen rule, reached out and let me drape it over her shoulders. The coat swallowed her. She kept Rose visible, though, pushing the doll out of the collar like, see, she's still here. Rose stays, I said. Got it. For a second, just a second, her mouth twitched. Not a smile, more like relief recognized. I backed out from under the platform and held out my arms. Can I carry you? It's icy and I don't want you to slip. This time she did move, on her knees first, then crawling, then standing. She was lighter than she looked when I lifted her, all bones and cold, smelling like diesel, old coffee, and fear. She tucked her face in against my shoulder like she'd done that 1,000 times with somebody else. You're okay, I murmured, walking us back through the falling wet snow, past freight cars and blinking signals. You're okay, kiddo. I got you. As we cleared the platform, I looked back. Footprints, small ones, led from the service building to the platform. The service building door, a metal door with the paint flaking, hung open an inch. A padlock knocked dully in the wind. Someone had locked that from the outside, I thought. Someone had put her here. The ambulance lights turned the snow pink and blue. Paramedic Gus Ramirez hopped down, already snapping on gloves. What did you find, Ward? Little girl, I said. Cold, scared, won't talk. She was hiding from the trains. Gus leaned in. Hey, sweetheart. I'm Gus. We're going to take you somewhere warm. She shifted, alarmed, fingers digging into my collar. She didn't want to let go. You ride up front with me, I told her. We can leave the siren off. Just lights. You like lights? Her eyes flicked to my face, testing truth. I nodded like we were making a pact. No loud noises. In the rig, Gus wrapped a silver thermal blanket around her and checked vitals. Pulse a little high, temp a little low, no immediate injuries. He tried a couple simple questions. What's your name? How long you been out? And got the same nothing I'd gotten. Shock? He asked quietly. Or trained silence, I said. We took Trent Avenue into town, snow melting on the windshield. Spokane lights blurred through it. She sat sideways in the passenger seat, my jacket zipped to her chin, Rose propped in her lap. Every time we passed a crossing and a distant horn bled through, her knees jerked. I reached over, flicked off the radio, kept talking low about nothing. How the river froze weird this time of year. How hospitals have hot chocolate. How I once found a puppy in a dumpster and he lived to 13. At Riverbend Children's, night staff met us. Warm air, lemon disinfectant, cartoon murals of orcas and mountains on the walls. The kind of place built to tell kids, you're safe now. A woman in blue scrubs with a Riverbend badge stepped forward. Mid-30s, red hair in a low ponytail, eyes that had seen too many long nights. Claire Monroe, R.N. What do we have? She asked. Female, about 6, found alone in the BNSF yard, Gus said. No ID, nonverbal right now. Cold exposure, but vitals are holding Claire bent, all softness. Hi, sweetheart. I'm Claire. The girl looked past Claire, scanning doors, hallways, exits, survival eyes. Claire's gaze dropped to the doll. She froze. Not for long, half a breath. But I saw her pupils change. Where did she get that? She whispered, almost to herself. I frowned. You recognize it? Claire straightened, face schooling back to professional, but there was a tremor she couldn't hide. Let's get her inside first. As the automatic doors swallowed the girl and her doll, A thought landed hard in my chest. Somebody here already knew her. The pediatric wing hummed softly. Vent systems, monitors, the distant wheel squeak of a night nurse. Fluorescent light turned everything a pale, forgiving blue. I stood by the doorway while the girl sat on the edge of the bed, small legs dangling above the floor, the doll Rose propped on her knees. Claire Monroe adjusted the blanket around her like she was tucking in her own child. The attending, Dr. Lewis murmured, "No bruising, no acute trauma. We'll need psych eval for selective mutism. Keep observation overnight." Then to me, "You said you found her near the depot?" "Under the old platform," said. "Locked closet door nearby, padlock hanging. Someone wanted her hidden." Claire turned sharply. "Locked from the outside?" "Yeah." She exhaled through her nose, something like fury laced with grief. Then she softened and knelt again, level with the child. "Honey, I'm Claire. You're safe here. No one's going to hurt you." The girl's gaze flicked to the doll again. Her fingers worried the yarn hair, thumb tracing the stitched petals on Rose's dress. "She hasn't said a word?" Claire asked me quietly. "Not one." Dr. Lewis said, "We'll get the trauma counselor in first thing. Officer Ward, if you can fill out a brief incident report, we'll coordinate with CPS." "Sure." I looked at the girl. "I'll be close, kiddo." "Don't worry." Her eyes followed me to the door, wary but holding on. In the hallway, Claire caught up. "You said she was under the platform." "Alone?" "Yeah, probably hours, maybe longer. Snow packed around her." Claire bit her lip. "You didn't find anything else?" "Like a tag and note bag. Just that doll." She hesitated, then reached into her scrubs pocket. "Wait here a second." She disappeared into the break room, returned with a coffee mug she nearly forgot to sip. Her hands shook. "I know that doll," she said finally. "You're sure?" Claire nodded. "Beth made it. My cousin, Beth Morgan. She ran a little cafe by the rail line, Railhouse Cafe. She stitched those dolls for the kids' corner." Her voice went small. "Beth has a daughter, Ivy. About 6 now." The name clicked against memory. The girl's eyes when I said Ivy back in the rig. One small nod. "She answered to it," I said slowly. "Barely." Like she wasn't sure if she was allowed, Claire's coffee trembled in her hand. "Beth disappeared 2 months ago after the cafe closed. Divorce, debts, I don't know. She cut off contact. We thought she left town. She might not have." Claire stared through the glass at the girl sitting on the bed, tracing patterns on Rose's dress. "That's Ivy," she said softly. "God." She looks smaller. I watched her expression fold in on itself. Relief and horror at once. "Let me check with CPS," I said. "They'll need next of kin verification." Claire nodded, eyes glassy. "She's been through something, officer." "Be gentle when you ask questions." "I will." By midnight, paperwork was half done. CPS would send a temporary guardian in the morning. I sat with the vending machine coffee that tasted like pennies, running through my notes: padlocked closet, coded train schedule, a child who trembled at horns, something more than neglect. When I looked back through the glass, Ivy had slid down under the blanket. The doll lay between her arms like a guardrail. Claire dimmed the lights and left the bedside lamp on low. I turned to go, then stopped. The faintest voice, hoarse, scratchy, barely audible through the crack in the door. She said, "Wait for the light." Claire froze mid-step. Did you hear that? Yeah, I whispered. She said that exact phrase, Claire murmured, hand to her mouth. Beth always told Ivy, when it's dark, wait for the light. I stepped closer to the bed. Ivy's eyes were open, half focused on the nightstand lamp. You did good, I said softly. You waited. No answer, but her breathing slowed. When I left the hospital, snow had stopped. The yard lights across the river gleamed faintly through fog. Something in me couldn't shut off. I drove back to the depot, parked with headlights off, and stepped out into the bitter quiet. The padlock still hung from the service door. I clicked on my flashlight, same model I'd used to find her. The beam cut through grime to the narrow corridor inside. Dust, tools, old coffee cans, paperwork. At the back, a metal cabinet with the BNSF logo. Inside, a schedule tacked to the wall, columns of train numbers and handwritten marks beside certain departure times. Blue pen, triangles instead of check marks. Some circled. Each triangle pointed toward one word scrawled along the margin. Row. A sound. Behind me, faint metal clatter. I turned fast, flashlight slicing across the room. Empty. Then something clicked under my boot. A small keychain flashlight. Newer. Scuffed. The same model I carried. I picked it up, thumbed it on. The beam was weak, fading, but it worked. Back at the hospital, I found her asleep again. I set the little light on the nightstand next to Rose and whispered, "For when it gets dark." Her fingers, half asleep, reached out and brushed it. Next morning, the first sun cracked over the river. The little flashlight glowed faintly against her palm, like it had found its home. And when Claire walked in and saw it, she whispered, trembling, "Beth used to sell those at the cafe." Something in my gut tightened. The cafe wasn't just a memory. It was a map. By dawn, the city was washed in a colorless cold. Spokane winter, where the light looked more like exhaustion than morning. I hadn't gone home. My cruiser smelled like burnt coffee and wet gloves. But my head kept spinning around that word scribbled beside the train times. Rose. At Riverbend, Ivy was awake, sitting up in bed with the flashlight still in her hand. She clicked it on and off, as if testing whether the world still obeyed her. Claire was spooning oatmeal into a paper cup. She slept through the night. Claire said quietly, "No episodes, but she still won't talk." "Not even to you?" Claire shook her head. "She hums sometimes. Little tune her mom used to sing. But no words." I crouched near the bed. "Morning, Ivy." Her eyes drifted to me, uncertain. "You kept the light on." "Good idea. Mind if I borrow it for a second?" She hesitated, then offered it, slowly, as though surrendering a piece of trust. I flicked it on, let the beam dance along the wall. "See that? Light finds its way no matter how small. Guess your mom taught you that, huh?" At the mention of her mother, her throat worked. One tiny sound came out, half breath, half vowel. Claire pressed her hand gently over Ivy's. "Officer Ward's helping," she said. "He's trying to find Mommy." That word, Mommy, cracked the air. Ivy looked up, eyes filling so fast it startled me. She clutched Rose tight and shook her head hard. Once, twice. Panic flooded her small face. "It's okay," I said softly, backing the words down to calm. "You don't have to say anything yet. We're just going to find her. That's all." The tremors eased, but she kept her face buried against the doll. Claire's voice broke. Beth loved trains. Her cafe was built inside an old rail house, That's why she called it the Railhouse Cafe. They used to watch the freight cars together from the window. I can't believe. She stopped herself, glancing at Ivy. She wouldn't abandon her. Then maybe she didn't, I said. The cafe sat 3 blocks north of the yard, its windows boarded, paint peeling where the wind hit hardest. The hand-painted sign, Railhouse Cafe, home pies, hot coffee, still hung crooked above the door. A faded chalkboard menu leaned against the wall, half covered in frost. I keyed the lock with department authorization, the hinges groaning like something waking from sleep. The air inside was stale with flour dust and memory. An overturned chair, cold coffee rings on the counter, receipts scattered like confetti. And on one wall, drawings, crayon figures. A woman with red hair holding hands with a little girl, both smiling beside a train. Below them, scrawled letters in a child's hand. Me and Mommy at work. The counter bell still worked when I tapped it. A dull ding. Behind the counter, I found an empty register drawer and a tin box of thread spools. Red, blue, pink. One spool matched the thread on Rose's dress exactly. I snapped photos, then stepped into the office behind the kitchen. A faint smell of fuel and paper mold. The same triangle symbols from the yard schedule appeared here too, drawn on a calendar pinned beside the phone. Every third Thursday circled, triangle inked in beside it. A noise behind me made me pin. The back door creaked open. "Officer Ward?" Claire stood there, coat dusted with snow, breath visible. Sorry. I couldn't sit still at the hospital. I should have told her to stay, but part of me was glad she came. "You shouldn't be here without clearance." "I'm family," she said simply. "And that's my cousin's handwriting." She pointed to the calendar. Those triangles, Beth used them in her invoices. It meant delivery pending. She kept a private ledger for supply orders, something she handled herself, not the staff. Where would that ledger be? Claire scanned the room, eyes narrowing at a framed photo half hung over the desk. It was crooked, as if someone had tried to take it off. Behind it, a small wall safe sat recessed into the plaster. We stared at it. She whispered, "I don't know the code." I glanced at the photo again. Beth and Ivy smiling, Rose the doll between them. A chalkboard behind them read, "Grand Reopening, May 14th. 514, I tried. Nothing. Claire frowned. Beth's birthday was April 2nd. I entered 402. A click. Inside, a worn leather notebook, folded checks, and one photograph. Beth standing beside a man in a safety vest marked Douglas Reed. Yard manager. His hand hovered on Ivy's shoulder in a way that made my stomach tighten. Claire stared. That's him. He helped Beth get her rail deliveries through when she reopened. She said he was kind. I flipped through the notebook. It wasn't a ledger. It was a code book. Lists of freight numbers, notes about unscheduled stops, initials beside each. Beth's last entry read, "If something happens, look under platform B. Wait for the light." The phrase Ivy had whispered. Claire's breath hitched. She knew. Knew what? That Reed was stealing fuel shipments. She must have found out. And Ivy saw something. The realization sat heavy between us. When I returned to the hospital, the social worker was just finishing with Ivy's temporary placement paperwork. The girl sat quiet, knees to her chest, flashlight still clutched like a talisman. "Ivy," I said softly, kneeling beside her. "You remember this?" I showed her the picture of Beth with Reed. Her eyes went wide. She flinched back, whispering, "Not to me." but to the doll pressed against her ear. Her lips moved fast. Then she pointed to Reed's hand in the photo, her small finger trembling. Claire watched, her face pale. What's she saying? I listened closer. A whisper, barely sound, but distinct enough. Bad man. Lock. She knew. Thank you, Ivy, I said quietly. You did good. You told us. Her little fingers found the flashlight switch and turned it on. The beam hit the ceiling, steady. Claire's hand covered her own. You found the light, sweetheart. Ivy looked at her cousin, at me, and then, so quietly it almost didn't register, she said her first clear word. Mommy. Claire broke. I had to step out before I did too, because somewhere in Spokane, Douglas Reed still held the keys to a locked door, and a woman named Beth Morgan might still be waiting behind it. The next morning cracked open under a white glare of snow. Spokane felt sharper, every sound amplified by the cold. I'd barely slept. Just kept replaying Ivy's whisper, that tiny word that slipped out like a breath she'd been holding for weeks. At the precinct, I dumped my gloves on the desk and called in a favor. Transit Division, Sergeant Hale, the voice answered. Hale, it's Ward. I need footage from BNSF Yard. Main line, loading platform B, last 30 days. High priority. 30 days? That's a ton of data. Then start with nights marked by triangle symbols on their schedule. 3 Thursdays back, 2 before that. And any night Reed was logged on site. Got it. I'll push it up the queue while I waited. I drove to city records for building permits and tax documents on the Railhouse Cafe. Most lines were routine, health inspections, supply invoices, but one entry caught me. Contractor liaison, Douglas Reed. Yard operations integration. Integration. The word meant connection. Paperwork overlap. He wasn't just helping Beth with deliveries, he was tying her shop to the yard's distribution chain. By noon, Hale called back. You're going to want to see this yourself. The Transit Division surveillance room was a dark cave of monitors. Hale rolled back in his chair, coffee untouched. This is from 2 weeks before you found the kid. On the screen, grainy footage of the depot's service corridor. Timestamp, 2:17 a.m. Beth Morgan appeared wearing her cafe apron, carrying a folder. She entered the service building, platform B. A minute later, Douglas Reed followed. He looked around, then pulled the door closed behind him. Hale advanced the feed. 10 minutes. 15. Reed emerged alone, locked the door, walked away. I felt something shift inside me, cold and slow. That's our padlock. Yeah, Hale said grimly. And here's the kicker. He switched to a second camera, an exterior freight cam aimed at a siding track 3. Nights later, someone small, child height, appeared near the platform edge, stumbling under the snow's glare. She crawled under the structure, hugging something to her chest. I didn't need to zoom in to know it was Ivy. My voice felt raw. He left her there. Hale rubbed his jaw. We checked. Reed filed a maintenance overtime sheet those same nights. No logs from Beth after that. Get a warrant on his office and home, I said. We'll find her. At Riverbend, Ivy was sitting by the window with Claire watching flakes spiral past the glass. The little flashlight blinked in her palm like a heartbeat. When she saw me, she gave a small nod, as if she'd been expecting me. Hey, partner, I said. Got something to show you. I slid a photo across the tray table, Beth smiling behind the cafe counter, sunlight catching the red in her hair. This is your mom, right? Ivy's face opened. She touched the photo gently, tracing Beth's outline with one finger, then pressed the picture to her chest. Her eyes shone but didn't break. Claire swallowed hard. She remembers. I think she's alive, I said. Claire's head snapped up. You have proof? Not yet. But Reed's been running something shady through those trains. Embezzlement, maybe trafficking of goods. Beth probably found out. He silenced her. Or tried to, Claire whispered. I need your help, I said. You said Beth made those dolls. How many? Dozens. She embroidered initials on the back hem of each dress for the kid she gave it to. Why? I turned the doll over, faintly stitched in red thread. BM7. Number 7, I said. Maybe a pattern. Maybe she used them to mark dates or shipments. Claire frowned. Her delivery list had 7 active clients. The 7th order was a special batch of coffee beans delivered directly to Reed's storage unit. Then that's where we start. Reed's office sat inside the administrative wing of the freight depot. Cheap wood paneling, motivational posters, that faint tang of diesel in the carpet. When we entered under warrant, he stood by the window with his arms folded, jaw tight. Officer Ward, didn't expect you back so soon. Where's Beth Morgan? I asked. He smiled like a man who'd practiced denial. Haven't seen her in months. She skipped town, left debts all over. I hear she was unstable. Funny, I said. Her 6-year-old didn't skip town. She was locked under your platform. His eyes flickered just once. That's ridiculous. You can't prove that Hale's voice from behind me. We can. Surveillance footage, your overtime sheets, and a child who remembers your hand. Reed's calm cracked. You think you know what you're doing, but you don't. That woman stole from me. She's the one. Enough, I said. Where is she? He glared. Dead, probably. Drunks hit the river all the time. I leaned forward just enough for him to see I wasn't bluffing. We'll find out. And if she's alive, every hour you left her will count. His mouth tightened. Lawyer. Good idea, I said. You'll need one. We left with his desktop tower, 2 ledgers, and a ring of keys marked Service Lockers A through C. Back at the hospital, Ivy was in the playroom drawing on a sheet of paper. When she saw me, she ran, not fast, just a quick, determined shuffle, and held up her drawing, a square with a triangle on top, next to a tall rectangle. Claire frowned. That's not the cafe. No, I said quietly, recognizing the outline. It's the warehouse office. Ivy looked from me to the drawing and back, then pointed to the rectangle. Her lips moved, soundless, but I read it clear as if she'd said it out loud. Mommy. She pointed again. Then she clicked the little flashlight once. On, off, on. A message. She was telling us where the light should go. I crouched until my eyes were level with hers. Okay, kiddo. We'll go find her. You did great. She pressed the flashlight into my hand. For Mommy, she whispered. That was the first time I heard her voice without fear. We hit the storage compound before dusk, the air brittle and still. Snow crunched under boots as I unlocked the side door with Reed's keys. Inside, the dark smelled of rust and cold metal. Split left, Hale said, flashlight beam sweeping crates. Look for any recently sealed areas. The warehouse hummed faintly with residual power from security lights. Rows of shipping containers lined the walls, each marked with white chalk numbers. I followed the pattern until I reached one at the back. Container 7BM. The lock was new. I turned the flashlight over in my hand. the one Ivy had given me, and clicked it on. The beam hit the steel seam. "Here," I called. Hale jogged over, crowbar ready. We cracked the lock. The smell hit first. Damp insulation, mildew, and something else. Soap. Human, not mechanical. Inside, tucked behind a stack of crates, was a narrow cot. Blankets, an empty thermos, a notebook, and a wall calendar with the same triangle symbols. Hale's breath clouded the air. Someone's been living here. On the cot lay a folded note. My hand shook slightly as I opened it. "If you found this, I'm still waiting." Under the light by the river, the same phrase again. Beth was alive. The river had started to thaw, breaking sheets of ice into drifting mirrors that carried the city's lights downstream. By nightfall, Spokane was nothing but the whisper of water against stone, the kind of cold that went through wool and bone. I parked near the levee where freight lines curved close to the riverbank. The area was closed for maintenance, but one sodium light still burned over the path. Its orange cone stretched across the snow like a signal. Under the light by the river. Hale stepped out beside me, crunching through ice shards. "You sure she's not long gone, Ward?" "Beth Morgan didn't vanish," I said. "She's hiding, or waiting for a sign that someone's listening." He sighed and checked his radio. "Units are covering both bridges. If Reed kept her anywhere near here, we'll find her." I stared at the flickering lamp. She told Ivy to wait for the light. Maybe she meant this exact one. We moved closer, flashlights sweeping through cattails and frozen mud. The air reeked faintly of diesel and river iron. My breath fogged the beam, fracturing it. Then something metallic glinted behind a retaining wall, half buried beneath snow. A small tin box. I crouched, scraped ice away, and pried it open. Inside was a folded photograph of Beth and Ivy, a scrap of paper with coordinates, and a locket shaped like a tiny train whistle. The paper read, "If Ivy is safe, find me where the freight sleeps." I turned to Hale. "The switching yard." Back in the car, I called Claire. "She's alive," I said before she could ask. "Beth's leaving a trail." On the other end, I heard a sharp inhale. "Where?" "Somewhere near the yard." She left a note. "Where the freight sleeps." Any idea what she meant? "The old roundhouse," Claire said instantly. "They decommissioned it last year. Locals still call it the freight sleeper. Stay with Ivy." "I'll call when we find her. Ivy's been drawing lights all evening," Claire murmured. "Rows of them." Maybe she remembers the place I gripped the wheel tighter. Then maybe we're close. The roundhouse sat on the city's edge, a semicircle of crumbling brick and glass broken like teeth. A single maintenance door hung crooked on one hinge. Inside, the echo of our boots bounced off the old turntable pit. It smelled of rust, oil, and something faintly sweet. Cinnamon, maybe. Hale's flashlight swept across a makeshift camp. Blankets, canned food, a small lantern still warm to the touch. "Beth?" I called softly. Silence. Then, from behind a row of derelict freight cars, a sound. Footsteps retreating fast. "Police!" Hale shouted. We followed the echo, our beams cutting through the dark until they hit a narrow corridor between cars. A woman darted out, face pale, hair matted beneath a wool cap. She stumbled, caught herself on a railing, and froze when she saw the badges. Beth Morgan. Her eyes widened, feral with fear. "Please," she rasped, voice raw. "Don't let him find her again." I lowered my light, keeping my voice steady. "Beth, Ivy's safe. She's at Riverbend with Claire." She blinked, disbelief breaking into sobs. "Claire, she's with your cousin." She's okay. Beth sagged against the car, every ounce of fight draining out of her. Tears streaked the soot on her face. He said he'd take her if I talked. Said nobody would believe me. Reed? She nodded, trembling. He used my cafe deliveries to move diesel and stolen parts. When I found out, he locked me in the service closet, took Ivy. I escaped when the shift changed, but by the time I got back, she was gone. Hale stepped forward gently. How long have you been hiding here? 2 months, waiting for someone to notice the triangles on the schedules. I kept marking them, hoping someone would trace it back. You left the note under the light? I asked. She managed a weak nod. I thought Ivy might see it. One day. She used to love walking down there. I handed her the small train whistle locket. This yours? Beth took it, eyes softening. It was Ivy's toy. I wore it so I wouldn't lose her. We'll get you both safe, I said. But we need your statement. Everything you know about Reed's operation. She hesitated. He's not done. There's a shipment tonight. Fake manifests, real goods. He'll be there to clear it. Hale met my eyes. Then we set a trap. By midnight, the freight yard was a web of movement, unmarked trucks idling near the east gate, floodlights cutting through sleet. I stood behind a row of tankers, radio pressed to my shoulder. Unit 3, eyes on Reed? Confirmed, Hale's voice came through. He's meeting a driver near track 4. Copy. I motioned Beth to stay low inside the car, hidden from view. She was shivering under my spare jacket, but nodded, eyes locked on the gate. Through the scope of my binoculars, I saw Reed handing over a clipboard to the driver, his posture all control. 2 other men unloaded crates labeled spare couplers, but the weight said otherwise. Units move in on my mark, I said quietly. Now. Red and blue flooded the yard. Officers poured from both sides, guns drawn. Reed froze mid-turn, hands raised. Douglas Reed, you're under arrest for embezzlement, kidnapping, and unlawful imprisonment, Hale called. Reed's eyes found me across the glare. You think this fixes anything? He spat. You have no idea who... Save it, I said. You're done. He tried one last lunge toward the cab, but an officer slammed him down before he got 2 steps. The cuffs clicked loud in the cold. As they dragged him toward the cruiser, Reed sneered. That kid won't remember you. None of them do. I stepped closer. She remembers enough to point to your hand in a photo. That's all we need. He looked away, face gray under the lights. By dawn, paperwork began. Beth sat in the break room, hands wrapped around a cup of tea she didn't drink. Claire arrived. First, snow still in her hair. When Beth saw her, she stood too fast, chair scraping tile. They met halfway, hugging like people who'd both stopped believing they'd ever get to. Is she? Beth's voice broke. She's safe, Claire said, smiling through tears. She's waiting for you. I drove them to Riverbend myself. The sky was blushing with first light when we walked into Ivy's room. The girl was awake, flashlight still on her lap. When Beth stepped inside, Ivy froze, the doll slipped from her hands. Then, movement. A small, shaky run, a collision of arms and tears. Beth fell to her knees, whispering, I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Ivy pressed the flashlight between them until its beam shone against both their faces. Beth laughed through tears. You kept the light. Ivy nodded, breathless, and whispered, You came back. Outside, snow started again, soft as ash. Inside, for the first time, it didn't feel cold. The morning after the arrest felt different. The city had softened. Somehow, snow falling slow, sirens distant. everything quieter than it had been in weeks. Inside Riverbend Children's, the hum of machines and muted voices blended into a fragile calm. Beth sat on Ivy's bed, her fingers tracing her daughter's hair as though relearning its texture. Ivy, drowsy but awake, had fallen asleep against her mother's chest, halfway through breakfast. The little flashlight rested between them, its beams still faintly glowing beneath the covers. Claire leaned against the doorway, arms folded, tears drying on her cheeks. "She hasn't let go since you came in," she whispered. Beth smiled, weary. "Neither have I." I stood back a few feet, watching the two of them breathe and sink. It's a rare thing seeing peace settle after so much noise. "You'll both need protection for a while," I said quietly, "until Reed's arraignment. CPS will expedite your release papers and the DA's office is filing charges." Beth nodded, voice hoarse. "You think he'll plead out?" "Not before. He drags it through mud," I said. "Men like that always think they can twist the truth one last time." Her eyes darkened. "He told me that night he'd bury me where the noise would cover it up." Guess he meant the trains. I caught her trembling and kept my tone calm. "He doesn't get to scare you anymore." Claire stepped closer, handing Beth a folded document. "I filed for temporary guardianship so they wouldn't separate you two again. The judge approved it this morning. Once the formal statement's done, you'll both be free to go." Beth stared at the paper as though it were a passport out of purgatory. "Thank you." Ivy stirred, rubbing her eyes. "Mommy?" Beth smiled through tears. "I'm here, sweetheart." The girl reached for her flashlight and pressed it into Beth's palm. "Your turn," she whispered. Beth clicked it on, watched the small circle of light bloom against the wall. "We'll keep it with us," she said softly. Claire mouthed toward me, "You did it." But I didn't feel done. Not yet. Later that afternoon, I met with ADA Lauren Kim in her office, a stack of evidence folders already waiting. "Your report's thorough," she said, flipping through pages. "We've got Reed dead to rights on embezzlement and unlawful imprisonment. The kidnapping count might need Beth's full statement." "She's ready," I said, "but we might have another problem." Reed wasn't working alone. Lauren raised an eyebrow. "You have names?" "Not yet. But someone scrubbed certain train manifests before we accessed the database. It means the fraud ran deeper. Someone higher up helped him hide it." Lauren sighed. "I'll coordinate with the Transit Bureau. If it reaches federal property, we can bring the feds in, make it clean," I said. "Beth doesn't need more courtroom circus than necessary." "She won't face him until trial," Lauren assured. "We'll handle everything through recorded depositions." Back at Riverbend, Ivy had moved to a private recovery room. Someone had placed Rose, the doll, beside her. Pillow. A nurse had sewn a new ribbon around its waist. Beth sat by the window, filling out forms, sunlight streaking across her face. She looked up when I knocked. "Officer Ward." "You ever rest?" "Not until the paperwork's done." I smiled faintly. "How are you holding up?" Her eyes wandered to Ivy, who was drawing circles of light with a crayon. Yellow, white, gold. "She keeps drawing lamps," Beth said. "Every page. I think she's teaching herself that light means safe now." I studied the drawing. Each circle overlapped slightly, a chain of glowing halos leading toward a small house in the corner. "Looks like home," I said. Beth smiled quietly. "That's the plan." Once we're cleared to leave, I'm reopening the cafe. It's all Ivy talks about. Pancakes and her seat by the window. I hesitated. "You sure you want to go back there?" "The place carries memories." "It also carries proof that we survived," she said simply. That's what she'll remember. I nodded. Then I'll help you change the locks first thing, she chuckled softly. You're not supposed to do house calls. Retirement perk, I said. I pick my rules. Her laughter faded into something gentler. You found my daughter when no one else even knew she was gone. How do I thank you for that? You already did, I said, glancing toward Ivy. She's sleeping in a warm bed. 2 days later, Beth signed her statement. The press got wind of the case, but the department kept details sealed, citing child privacy laws. Reed was transferred to county jail, awaiting federal review. On my last shift before leave, I drove out to the Railhouse Cafe. Snow had melted off the roof, the sign half cleaned by weather. Inside, Beth was scrubbing counters, the faint scent of coffee beans returning to the air. Ivy sat on a stool, coloring under the glow of a newly fixed light fixture. The same flashlight now hung from her backpack zipper, a tiny beam swaying as she kicked her feet. Look who's here, Beth said when she saw me. I waved to Ivy. So, this the new headquarters? Ivy nodded solemnly. Mom says it's home again. It will be, Beth said. I found the old menu chalkboard in storage. Thought about keeping the name. I ran a hand over the counter. Railhouse Cafe? She shook her head. No, I'm renaming it the Lightkeepers. I paused, smiling. That's fitting. She nodded. We both waited long enough to see one. Outside, the street shimmered wet with meltwater. Inside, warmth was finally winning against the cold. Ivy climbed onto her mother's lap, flashlight tucked safely between their hands. Beth whispered, You're safe, baby. Always. The little beam flickered once, steady and sure, casting a small circle on the cafe wall, right where the word open would soon hang again. The reopening was quiet. No ribbon cutting, no fanfare. Just the smell of brewed coffee, the low hum of an old radio, and the slow return of light through the Railhouse Cafe's front windows. The snow had thinned into a soft drizzle, turning Spokane gray and gentle. Inside, Beth and Claire were rearranging the counter while Ivy sat near the window seat, a tiny stack of coloring books beside her. I hadn't planned to stop by that morning, but something about the glow through the glass pulled me in. The open sign swung faintly, still drying from fresh paint. Beth looked up when I stepped inside. You're right on time, Officer Ward. Elliot, I corrected, removing my cap. You can drop the badge part now. She smiled. Force of habit. The cafe looked alive again. Walls scrubbed clean, wood polished. The same smell of cinnamon Beth must have baked into the place itself. The counter bell worked. The lights didn't flicker. And Rose the doll sat on a small shelf behind Ivy like a guardian. Claire poured coffee into 2 mugs and slid one across. You helped save this place. You don't pay here. Then at least let me leave a tip, I said, dropping $1 into the jar. The sound made Ivy giggle. A small, quiet music that seemed new every time. Beth's eyes softened. She's been laughing more lately. She's earned it, I said. We sat for a while watching customers drift in, a postal worker, a young couple, 2 rail workers curious about the reopening. None of them knew the story. Not really. They just knew the coffee was warm and the lights were steady again. When the rush died down, Beth came around the counter. There's something I wanted to show you. She led me to the back wall where an old photograph hung. Beth and Ivy before everything went dark. Below it, framed in wood, was the same small flashlight Ivy had carried. Beam long dead now. Beneath it, a brass plate read, When it's dark, wait for the light. I swallowed hard. You're building a shrine. She smiled. A reminder. For her, for me, Ivy looked up from her coloring book. For you too, she added softly. Beth laughed. Apparently, you're part of the collection. I sat down across from Ivy. You sure you're okay with me being in your museum, kiddo? She nodded. You found me. That stopped me cold. Simple, matter of fact, no sentiment, just truth. Beth laid a hand on her daughter's shoulder. She remembers more every day. Sometimes she wakes up and says she hears trains but doesn't shake anymore. Sounds like progress, I said. Claire joined us, drying her hands on a towel. Beth's been talking to a trauma specialist, Dr. Cooper. She's helping Ivy rebuild speech through routine. Beth nodded. She told me kids like Ivy don't forget. They just need something safe to anchor to. She smiled faintly. So, we built one. I looked around. The cafe wasn't fancy, but it was steady. Smells, textures, voices layered like protection. Anchors work both ways, I said. Beth tilted her head. Meaning? She keeps you here too. Gives you reason to breathe normal again. Her eyes glistened, but she nodded. Yeah, that's about right. A week later, the court hearing came. Reed in cuffs and County Orange sat beside his attorney while the judge read. The list of charges: embezzlement, kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, fraud. His face was a portrait of denial until the evidence rolled. Time-stamped footage, Beth's testimony, ledger entries in his handwriting, and the matching codes from the cafe notebooks. When the surveillance clip played, the one showing Reed locking the service door, he couldn't look at the screen. Beth sat beside me, fingers trembling on the edge of her seat. I leaned closer. You don't have to watch. I do, she whispered. He took everything from me. I need to see it end. Across the aisle, Ivy sat with Claire and a social worker. The judge had allowed her to stay for the verdict, but not the questioning. She held Rose in her lap, the new ribbon tied firm. The prosecutor finished with quiet precision. For 2 months, this man used fear to silence a mother and a child. But fear lost, because light doesn't ask permission to return, it just does. The judge's gavel came down like a promise. Mr. Reed, you are remanded without bail pending federal indictment. Beth exhaled for the first time in minutes. I glanced over at Ivy, who was whispering something to the doll, small lips forming words no one else could hear. Then she looked up at her mother and smiled. Soft, certain, whole. Outside the courthouse, snow had begun again, flakes catching the light in bursts. Reporters waited, but Beth didn't stop. She just took Ivy's hand and started walking toward the car. Claire met my eyes, mouthed thank you, then followed them. I lingered near the steps, listening to the muffled city sounds beneath the snow. Hale joined me, coat collar up. You ever think of taking a real vacation? Maybe, I said, but not today. He smirked. Retirement doesn't mean you keep saving people. Maybe it does, I said quietly, just not the same way. That evening, I stopped by the cafe one last time. The lights were low, the sign glowing faintly through the fogged glass. Inside, Ivy was asleep in the booth, Rose in her arms. Beth wiped down the counter, humming the same tune Ivy had hummed in the hospital, the one that used to be too heavy to finish. I put a small wrapped box on the counter. For her, I said. Tell her it's from an old cop who still believes in flashlights. Beth smiled. What is it? Just batteries. She laughed softly. You never quit, do you? Not when the dark keeps showing up. I said. She looked toward Ivy, her voice gentling. Thank you, Elliot. For finding her. For finding me, I nodded, throat tight. You both did the hard part. You waited outside, the streetlights flickered to life one by one, stretching their glow across the damp pavement. Inside, mother and daughter slept in the warmth they'd rebuilt. And somewhere beneath the soft hum of the trains, the city exhaled. Winter broke late that year, as if Spokane itself didn't quite believe in spring anymore. But the thaw came all the same. First in the sound of dripping eaves, then in the pale scent of wet earth, and coffee from the Railhouse Cafe's reopened doors. I'd been retired 2 weeks when I walked in again. My badge sat in a drawer now, my radio turned in, but the habit of checking corners hadn't left me. The cafe was busier this time. College kids with laptops, a crew of mechanics on lunch break, a mother rocking a stroller in the corner. Life, ordinary and unremarkable. The most beautiful thing I'd seen in months. Beth spotted me through the crowd, smiled. You finally kept your promise, she said, sliding a mug toward me. Decaf, just how you like it. Decaf's for old men, I said, but took it anyway. She grinned. Then I guess it fits. Ivy was at the window again, sketching. Her drawing book was thick now, pages crammed with color. No more gray crayon skies, no more trembling lines, just bright circles, houses, trains, faces. In the latest drawing, a stick figure in a blue jacket stood beside a smaller one holding a flashlight. Above them, written in uneven but confident letters, Lightkeeper Friends. Guess I've been promoted, I said, smiling. Beth leaned on the counter. She wanted to name the story after you, but I told her this one's all hers. Good call. Claire appeared from the back, apron dusted with flour. Heard you've been pestering the DA's office, she said. I shrugged. Just wanted to make sure the right people got credit. Reed's going away for a long time, but his investors, someone needs to finish the cleanup. Beth frowned. You mean there's still others? Always are, I said. Paperwork showed another name, RJ Logistics out of Portland. They funneled Reed's transfers. The feds will chase that trail now. Claire shook her head. So it never really ends. No, I said, sipping the coffee, but sometimes it gets quiet enough to breathe. The bell over the door chimed. A man in his 50s entered, a heavy wool coat, careful eyes. He paused when he saw Beth, almost unsure whether to approach. Beth stiffened slightly. Elliot, that's Henry Caldwell, she whispered. He used to manage freight contracts before Reed took over. I remembered the name from a case note. Logistics billionaire, funder of public rail upgrades. Caldwell removed his hat. Mrs. Morgan, he said, voice steady but soft. I heard what happened. You have no idea how sorry I am. Beth folded her arms. You worked with him. With Reed. I did, he admitted. But I didn't know what he was doing with the schedules until your cafe ledger surfaced. Those coded triangles, that's how he laundered shipments under my company's ID. You exposed that. Because of you, his network collapsed. Her expression didn't soften. Tell that to a 6-year-old who slept under a train platform. Caldwell lowered his head. That's exactly why I'm here. He placed a small envelope on the counter. This is a trust fund in Ivy's name. Enough to secure her education and the cafe's future. No strings. Beth looked at me. Should I even? It's legit, I said. He testified for the prosecution. Caldwell smiled faintly. You taught us all something, Mrs. Morgan. That silence costs more than money. Keep the cafe, Keep the light on, he left. Before she could answer, his coat brushing the door frame as the bell chimed again. Ivy looked up from her drawing. Who was that? Beth smiled at her. Someone who finally saw the light. By afternoon, the place emptied. The rain turned soft, tapping the windows like a fingertips. Beth pulled a chair across from me, exhaustion tempered by calm. You really are done now, aren't you? Supposedly. What'll you do with yourself? Still figuring that out. I glanced toward Ivy, who was humming again. That same little tune she'd murmured in the hospital, only now full, confident, threaded with joy. You ever think, Beth asked, how many people walk past something small and miss it? A sound, a light, a voice. I did, for years. Until everything went dark. You waited, I said. You paid attention when it mattered. She nodded, eyes glistening. She saved me too, you know. I thought I was the one protecting her, but she kept that flashlight. She waited and she believed I looked at the beam of late sunlight cutting across the counter. She learned it from you. Beth smiled through quiet tears. You talk like a man who still believes in redemption. Maybe I do. Outside, the sky cleared enough to let a band of light spill across the street, touching the cafe's sign. Ivy saw it first, pressing her hand against the window glass. Mommy, look! It's our light. Beth joined her, leaning close. Yeah, sweetheart. It followed us home. I watched the two of them reflected in the glass. One small beam, one steady flame. The kind of reflection that stays with you long after the scene fades. Take care of each other, I said, setting my empty mug down. Beth turned, smiling. We will. As I stepped outside, the cafe door closed softly behind me. The sign above glowed open in bright white, steady against the gray. Halfway down the block, I turned back. Through the window, I could still see them. Beth wiping the counter, Ivy dancing her flashlight beam along the wall, drawing circles of light that overlapped, merged, and became one. It was enough. Spring settled in slowly, the way Spokane always woke after a long freeze. Hesitant at first, then bursting into color. The lilacs bloomed along the river walk. Freight horns carried softly on the wind. And for the first time in months, the sound didn't make Ivy flinch. When I visited the cafe one Saturday morning, sunlight poured through the front windows, scattering across mugs and polished tables. The air smelled like cinnamon again. Ivy stood on a stool behind the counter, carefully dusting powdered sugar over muffins while Beth guided her hands. Health code might frown on child labor, I said from the doorway. Beth laughed, turning toward me. She's an intern. Paid in pancakes, Ivy grinned shyly, holding up a muffin. For you. I took it, pretending to inspect the powdered sugar like it was evidence. Looks like top quality work. You keeping the light on for me? She reached into her pocket and pulled out the little flashlight. Fresh batteries, beam bright. Always. It was the first time I'd seen her offer it willingly, like the fear had been drained from the object and replaced with pride. Beth leaned against the counter. Claire's coming by later. We're starting a program for foster kids. Free meals, books, a place to stay warm. The city approved it last week. I smiled. You're turning this into more than a cafe. Call it paying forward, Beth said. We'll call it Lightkeeper Afternoons, Ivy's idea. Ivy nodded solemnly. Everyone needs a light. I raised my coffee in salute. You're not wrong, kiddo. Outside, a group of volunteers hung string lights along the fence facing the tracks. The reflection shimmered in the cafe window like rows of small suns. Beth watched them, with quiet satisfaction. You ever think we'd get here? She asked. I took a sip of coffee. Didn't know where we'd get. Just knew we couldn't stop halfway. She studied me for a long moment. You've got that look again. What look? The one that says you're still listening for the next case, even if you're pretending to be retired. I shrugged. Hard to turn off 30 years of noise. Beth's smile was faint but knowing. Then maybe stay here long enough to learn quiet. Before I could answer, the bell over the door chimed. Claire came in carrying a cardboard box labeled donations. She nodded toward me. Perfect timing, officer. Oh, right. Retired officer. Old habits, I said. Need help? Always. She set the box down and began unpacking. Books, toys, some art supplies. At the bottom lay a photo frame still wrapped in paper. Beth unwrapped it carefully. Inside was the old Railhouse Cafe sign, cleaned, the word Railhouse painted over with one new word, Lightkeepers. Beth ran her fingers over the letters. It's official. Then Claire smiled. And city council's covering a small grant. Guess somebody up there likes your story. Beth's voice softened. It's not mine alone. She glanced at me, then at Ivy. It belongs to all of us. That evening, the first Lightkeeper afternoon began. A few neighborhood kids arrived, their laughter filling the space. Ivy led them to a corner table where crayons and paper waited. Draw your own light, she said solemnly, as if giving sacred instructions. I stood near the door, watching her explain how to blend yellow with white to make it shine better. Beth served cocoa, Claire handled the register, and for a moment, it was easy to forget how this all began. With a girl hidden beneath a frozen platform, clutching a rag doll. Beth caught me watching and walked over. She's healing, she said quietly. Dr. Cooper says her speech delay is almost gone. She's teaching too, I said. That's progress. Beth smiled. Every night she insists on keeping her flashlight by the bed. I asked if she still needs it, and she said, it's not for me anymore. It's for people who are still scared. Something in my throat tightened. She's braver than most adults I know. She had to be, Beth whispered. But now she gets to be a kid. Later, when the crowd thinned, Ivy came to my table holding a drawing. For you, she said. It showed 3 figures under a string of glowing circles. Me, Beth, and Ivy, each with a small beam connecting us. Above it, in careful letters, she'd written, We found the light. I stared at it longer than I meant to. This goes on my wall, I said finally. Ivy beamed. Promise? Promise. Beth touched my arm. She doesn't give drawings to everyone. I'll guard it with my life. We laughed quietly, the kind of laughter that comes when the world stops demanding proof of survival. Outside, the freight trains rolled by, steady, low, no longer frightening. Ivy ran to the window, waving at the passing cars. The lights along the fence flickered in, rhythm with the rails. Beth joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Every time a train passes, she said softly, we turn on one light in the cafe. It's our rule. Why? I asked. So no one thinks they're alone out there. I looked up at the row of bulbs glowing along the wall, their reflections trembling in the window glass. Then you'd better keep them bright, I said. Beth smiled. We will. Ivy clicked her flashlight once, the beam cutting across the room like a heartbeat. See, Mom, she whispered. It's still working. Beth kissed her hair. It always will. The bell above the door rang as another gust of spring air rolled through, stirring the scent of coffee and rain. I turned toward the street, but before I stepped out, Beth called after me. Elliot? I paused. You were the first lightkeeper, she said. Don't forget that. I nodded once, unable to speak, and pushed the door open. Outside, dusk settled over the tracks, the city's glow reflected in puddles, faint, but steady, like a promise kept. Summer arrived without warning, one of those Pacific Northwest shifts where spring simply exhaled and the world bloomed overnight. By June, the riverbanks were green again. The air carried that sweet metallic scent of trains and rain, and the Lightkeeper's Cafe had become a small miracle people whispered about across Spokane. I hadn't planned on coming back that morning. Retirement was supposed to mean distance, quiet walks, fly fishing, forgetting the sound of dispatch radio. But there are some doors you can't help but open again. When I stepped inside, Beth was adjusting a new frame on the wall, a photograph of the cafe taken from across the tracks at dusk, lights glowing in every window. Beneath it, the same brass plate she'd used before. When it's dark, wait for the light. She turned and smiled. You always show up right when we finish something. I nodded toward the picture. Seems finished to me. Not yet. She motioned toward the back, where Ivy stood on a stool beside a tall, grinning man with a camera. She's helping the reporter from the Spokesman Review. They're doing a piece on local recovery projects. Ivy waved when she saw me. Her hair had grown longer, a silver clip holding it away from her face. Rose, the doll, sat on the counter beside her, patched but still sturdy. Officer Elliot, she said, voice bright now. No tremor, no whisper. Want to be in the picture? I think I'll stay behind the lens this time. Beth crossed her arms, watching her daughter. She practiced that for a week, talking to strangers. Dr. Cooper says her selective mutism's officially resolved. I looked at Ivy, radiant in the sunlight streaking through the window. I'd say that's an understatement. When the photographer left, Ivy climbed down and handed me a folded paper. I wrote something for you, she said. It was a crayon drawing again, but this one had words written in blocky letters beneath 3 stick figures. Beth, Ivy, and me, standing under a sign that said, Home. Around them, circles of yellow filled the sky. What are these? I asked. Lights, she said matter-of-factly. They don't go out. Even when you're gone, my throat tightened. Guess I'll have to keep mine shining too. That afternoon, Beth closed early so we could walk down to the river, the same place where she'd hidden that tin box months ago. The city felt lighter now. Music from the farmer's market drifted across the water. Kids skipped stones, and the air no longer smelled like fear. Beth sat on the bench beside me, watching Ivy chase dragonflies near the reeds. Sometimes I still dream about the trains, she said quietly. The sound used to scare me awake. Now it reminds me she's here. She reclaimed it, I said. That's strength. Beth nodded. I think she learned it from you. Not from me, I said. I just showed up with a flashlight. You're the one who taught her what to do with it. She smiled, eyes glinting in the late sun. You ever regret not having your own family? I thought about it. The years, the cases, the silence that waited at home. Sometimes, I admitted. But maybe pieces of family find you anyway. Her gaze softened. You're part of ours, you know. Before I could answer, Ivy came running up, breathless and glowing. Mom, look! She held out a smooth stone shaped almost like a heart. It was under the light post. Beth laughed, taking it gently. You always find treasures. Ivy turned to me. You can keep it, Officer Elliot. I took the stone, feeling the weight of it, warm from her hand. I'll keep it close. She grinned. You have to promise to come back. Mom says the light keepers always return. I'll come back. I said, that's a promise. Weeks later, I received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a photograph, Beth and Ivy behind the cafe counter, the open sign glowing in the window. Tucked beside it, a short note written in Beth's neat handwriting. We finally fixed the clock over the door. It chimes at noon. Now, same time you found her that night. Ivy says that's when our story began. And maybe she's right. The world feels wider again, but you're always part of it. Thank you for showing us that light is worth waiting for. Below it, in Ivy's uneven scrawl, come visit soon. Bring cookies. I set the letter on my kitchen table, the morning sun spilling across it. Outside, somewhere far off, a train horn blew. A low, steady note. Not the cry of something lost, but the sound of something still moving forward. I picked up my coat, slipped the small flashlight into the pocket, a habit I hadn't broken, and headed out. When it's dark, wait for the light. And if you can't find it, be it.